What if I told you that behind the luxury, the power, and the blood-stained empires, these 14 gangsters shaped the world in ways you never imagined? You will step into their dark, dangerous lives, where fortunes were built on fear, and death was always one misstep away. Their stories aren't just history. They're a chilling reminder of how close the shadows can get to you. Number 14. George Babyface Nelson, USA. Earnings estimate, $500 million. Picture this: a wiry, sharp-eyed man with a deceptively boyish face. But behind that youthful veneer lay one of the most ruthless and daring criminals of the Prohibition era. George Babyface Nelson earned his nickname for his youthful appearance, but his reputation as a bloodthirsty outlaw made even the most hardened gangsters of the 1920s and 1930s shudder. With a machine gun in hand and an insatiable thirst for chaos, Nelson carved his name into the annals of American crime. Born Lester Gillis in Chicago in 1908, Nelson grew up amidst the tough streets of a city brimming with gang activity. By his early teens, he was already dabbling in petty crime, but it didn't take long for him to graduate to the big leagues. Nelson became infamous during the height of Prohibition, a time when organized crime thrived in the shadows of America's teetotaling experiment. Nelson was no ordinary bank robber. He was a thrill seeker, someone who relished the adrenaline of a high-stakes heist. Known for his violent temper and trigger-happy tendencies, he was as unpredictable as he was fearless. His bank robberies were not merely about the money. They were spectacles, carefully orchestrated to shock and awe. With his signature Tommy gun, Nelson would storm into banks and make off with thousands of dollars, taunting law enforcement as he disappeared into the horizon. Adjusted for today's value, his exploits netted him an astounding $500 million. But it wasn't just banks that felt the wrath of Babyface Nelson. During Prohibition, the illicit liquor trade was a lucrative business, and Nelson wasn't one to miss out. He made a fortune as a bootlegger, running illegal alcohol through the veins of America's underground economy. Whether it was whiskey smuggled from Canada or moonshine brewed in hidden distilleries, Nelson's cut always ensured he lived like a king, albeit one constantly on the run. Nelson's life was a whirlwind of danger and decadence, but it was also marred by bloodshed. His infamous trigger finger left a trail of death in its wake, earning him a reputation as one of the most violent gangsters of his time. FBI agents found themselves on a constant chase, and Nelson relished the challenge. In one infamous encounter, he killed 3 federal agents, cementing his status as public enemy number 1. But Nelson's fiery life was destined for an equally dramatic end. In 1934, after a fierce gunfight with FBI agents known as the Battle of Barrington, Babyface Nelson succumbed to his injuries. Even in death, he refused to go quietly, engaging in one last shootout that epitomized his defiant spirit. Today, George Babyface Nelson remains a legendary figure in American criminal lore, a man whose audacious crimes and unrelenting thirst for notoriety continue to fascinate. From the glittering spoils of his heists to his unrelenting defiance of authority, Nelson's story is a testament to the chaotic allure of the gangster era. Number 13. Joseph Kennedy, USA. Earnings estimate, $600 million. Joseph P. Kennedy was the original American power player, a man whose ambition and cunning helped lay the foundation for one of the most famous political dynasties in history. But before his son John F. Kennedy became the 35th President of the United States, Joseph Kennedy built a vast fortune, weaving together legitimate ventures with whispered rumors of more illicit origins. Was he a savvy investor or a shadowy figure who made his wealth smuggling booze during Prohibition? The truth remains cloaked in mystery, but the legend of Joseph Kennedy endures. Born in Boston in 1888 to Irish immigrants, Kennedy quickly developed a taste for wealth and influence. With a sharp mind for numbers and an unrelenting drive, he climbed the social ladder, first as a banker, then as a businessman. By the 1920s, Joseph was already a millionaire, but the arrival of Prohibition in 1920 offered a golden opportunity for a man of his ambition, and perhaps his moral flexibility. Rumors of Kennedy's involvement in bootlegging swirled as Prohibition gripped the nation. The whispers suggested he smuggled whiskey from Canada and worked with mobsters to flood speakeasies with premium liquor. While concrete evidence of his bootlegging ties is elusive, his associations with powerful figures in the underworld and his sudden explosion of wealth during this period only added fuel to the fire. Kennedy himself vehemently denied these accusations. But as the saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire, or perhaps whiskey. Regardless of how it started, Kennedy's empire grew rapidly during the Prohibition years. His knack for timing the stock market became legendary. While others lost everything during the 1929 crash, Kennedy sold his shares just before the market crumbled, cementing his reputation as a financial wizard. He reinvested his fortune in Hollywood, buying film studios and securing lucrative deals with stars and producers. Joseph Kennedy was no ordinary businessman. He was a man who understood how to make deals, exploit opportunities, and stay ahead of the competition. By the 1930s, Kennedy had diversified into real estate, purchasing prime properties in Boston, New York, and Florida. His ability to see potential where others saw risk was unmatched. Meanwhile, his family's social standing soared as he meticulously cultivated connections with political elites. The Kennedy name, once just another Irish-American family in Boston, now resonated with wealth, power, and influence. Kennedy's legacy as the patriarch of the Kennedy dynasty is undeniable, but his alleged bootlegging past adds a tantalizing edge to his story. Was he a cunning smuggler who outwitted both the law and the competition, or simply a brilliant businessman who capitalized on America's tumultuous times? The truth may never be fully known, but that ambiguity only adds to the mystique. What's clear is that Joseph Kennedy was a man who played by his own rules, reshaping the American dream in his image. From the shadowy whispers of Prohibition to the glittering lights of Hollywood and the halls of Washington, his story is one of ambition, risk, and relentless pursuit of success. Number 12. Ismael Zambada, Mexico. Earnings estimate, $1 billion. Ismael El Mayo Zambada is the phantom kingpin of the Mexican drug underworld. Unlike his flashier counterparts who sought fame and the limelight, Zambada chose to operate from the shadows, orchestrating one of the world's most powerful criminal empires with the precision of a chess grandmaster. As a leader of the infamous Sinaloa cartel, Zambada built a billion-dollar empire trafficking cocaine, marijuana, heroin, and methamphetamine to every corner of the globe. His genius, logistics, secrecy, and an uncanny ability to evade capture for over half a century. Born in 1948 in the rugged hills of Sinaloa, Zambada's journey into the drug trade began humbly as a farmer. But the fertile soil of his homeland offered not just crops, but the ideal conditions for growing marijuana and opium poppies. It was in these remote mountains that Zambada's empire began to take root. By the 1970s, he had moved beyond cultivation, becoming an integral part of the smuggling networks that transported drugs into the United States. Where others saw chaos, Zambada saw opportunity. As Mexican cartels grew increasingly violent and fractured, El Mayo emerged as a stabilizing force. He didn't rely on brute force alone. His weapon of choice was strategy. Zambada revolutionized the drug trade by creating a global distribution network that rivaled multinational corporations. His genius lay in logistics. Using private planes, submarines, tunnels, and even commercial shipping routes, Zambada ensured that his products reached their markets efficiently and undetected. Unlike his former partner Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who craved the spotlight and ultimately paid for it with arrest and imprisonment, Zambada embraced a quieter role. Rarely photographed and even less frequently seen, he became a ghost, a name whispered in law enforcement circles but seldom confirmed. His invisibility was his greatest strength, allowing him to evade capture even as his lieutenants and rivals fell. Zambada's influence extended far beyond the drug trade. He mastered the art of corruption, infiltrating law enforcement, politics, and even the military. Entire police forces and government officials in Mexico were on his payroll, ensuring that his operations ran smoothly. He was a kingmaker in his own right, shaping not just the drug trade but the very fabric of the regions he controlled. Despite his low profile, El Mayo's reach was global. His cartel supplied drugs not only to the United States but also to Europe and Asia. Estimates of his earnings adjusted to today's values place him at the pinnacle of the criminal elite, with a net worth of approximately $1 billion. It was only in July 2024 that Ismael Zambada was finally arrested and he had a private airfield in El Paso. The fact that he remained a free man for so long is a rare feat for someone of his stature in the cartel world. His ability to adapt, stay out of the public eye, and maintain control over one of the most dangerous industries on the planet has cemented his legacy as a criminal mastermind. Zambada isn't just a kingpin. He's a ghost who built an empire, leaving law enforcement chasing shadows. Number 11. Yoshio Kodama. Japan. Earnings estimate: $1.2 billion. Yoshio Kodama was a mastermind who blurred the lines between organized crime, politics, and global power struggles in post-war Japan. As a Yakuza leader, political fixer, and black market kingpin, Kodama orchestrated an empire of crime and corruption that amassed him a fortune worth $1.2 billion in today's terms. He was a man who thrived in the shadows, wielding influence that stretched from Tokyo's neon-lit streets to the corridors of power in Washington and beyond. Born in 1911 in Tokyo, Kodama grew up in a Japan marked by economic upheaval and political turmoil. By the time World War II erupted, he was already deeply entrenched in the Yakuza, Japan's infamous organized crime syndicate. Kodama's wartime activities read like a spy thriller. He served as a secret intelligence operative for the Japanese military, building smuggling networks across Asia. He trafficked in valuable commodities like tungsten, rubber, and opium, which not only fueled Japan's war machine, but also lined his own pockets. When Japan surrendered in 1945, the country was left in ruins, its economy shattered, and its people desperate. But where others saw despair, Kodama saw opportunity. He quickly established himself as a dominant force in the black market, trafficking in everything from stolen goods to weapons. During Japan's chaotic reconstruction, Kodama's connections to corrupt officials and his vast smuggling networks made him indispensable to both the underworld and legitimate businesses looking to rebuild. Kodama's genius lay in his ability to bridge the worlds of crime and politics. He wasn't just a gangster, he was a kingmaker. During the Cold War, the United States saw Kodama as a useful ally in curbing the spread of communism in Japan. He became a political fixer, using his wealth and influence to fund conservative politicians who aligned with American interests. In exchange, Kodama received a free pass to expand his criminal empire, further cementing his position as one of Japan's most powerful men. One of Kodama's most infamous ventures was his role as a secret shareholder in the Lockheed scandal of the 1970s. Acting as a middleman, he facilitated bribes between the American aerospace giant and Japanese politicians, including then Prime Minister Kakuei Tanaka, to secure lucrative aircraft deals. The scandal shook Japan's political landscape, but Kodama emerged largely unscathed, his legend as a shadowy puppet master growing ever larger. Despite his wealth and power, Kodama remained a polarizing figure in Japanese society. To some, he was a symbol of post-war corruption, a man who profited from the suffering of his people. To others, he was a necessary evil, a pragmatist who helped stabilize Japan during its darkest days. Yoshio Kodama's story is one of contradictions, a criminal who shaped national policy, a gangster who mingled with diplomats, and a smuggler who rebuilt a shattered empire. His life was a testament to the power of ambition, connections, and the willingness to operate in moral gray zones. Kodama wasn't just a Yakuza leader. He was Japan's underworld emperor. Number 10. Semion Mogilevich. Russia, Ukraine. Earnings estimate: $1.5 billion. Semion Mogilevich, often dubbed the Brainy Dawn, is a name that evokes both fear and fascination in the world of organized crime. Unlike many gangsters who relied on brute force to build their empires, Mogilevich used intellect and strategy to create a global criminal syndicate that generated a staggering $1.5 billion in today's value. His criminal enterprises spanned continents, and his ability to outsmart law enforcement made him one of the most elusive and dangerous crime lords of the modern era. Born in Kiev, Ukraine, in 1946, Mogilevich's beginnings were as unassuming as they come. But beneath the surface lay a calculating mind, one destined for a life of high-stakes crime. After earning an economics degree, Mogilevich began his ascent in the Soviet underworld by conning fellow Jews who were emigrating to Israel. By purchasing their valuables at cut-rate prices with false promises of safe transportation, he amassed an initial fortune that would serve as the foundation for his empire. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, Mogilevich saw an opportunity in the chaos that engulfed the former Eastern Bloc. He became a key player in arms dealing, leveraging corrupt officials and warlords desperate to arm their factions. His operations funneled weapons to conflict zones across the globe, with profits flowing back into his vast network. Drugs were another cornerstone of Mogilevich's empire. He controlled routes that moved narcotics from Asia to Europe, raking in millions as his organization grew in power and influence. Yet, it wasn't the guns or drugs that truly set Mogilevich apart. It was his mastery of white-collar crime. Mogilevich's financial schemes were breathtakingly sophisticated. He orchestrated scams that bilked investors and governments out of hundreds of millions of dollars. Perhaps his most infamous operation was a $150 million fraud involving a fake company called YBM Magnex. The company, supposedly producing industrial magnets, duped investors in North America into pouring money into a non-existent venture. By the time the scam unraveled, Mogilevich had already siphoned off his share and disappeared into the shadows. Mogilevich's global reach was unparalleled. His organization operated in over 30 countries, employing lawyers, bankers, and corrupt officials to shield him from prosecution. Interpol and the FBI labeled him one of the most dangerous criminals alive, with the latter placing him on their most wanted list. Despite this, Mogilevich remains a free man, reportedly living in Moscow under the protection of Russian authorities, who seem unwilling or unable to extradite him. What makes Mogilevich so terrifying isn't just his crimes, but the sheer intelligence behind them. Dubbed the Brainy Don, he turned organized crime into an art form, blending brute force with financial acumen to create a global empire. His story is a chilling reminder of what happens when intellect and ambition are wielded without morality. For Semion Mogilevich, crime isn't just a business. It's a legacy that continues to cast a long, dark shadow over the world. Number 9. El Chapo, Mexico. Earnings estimate, $2 billion. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Lora is a name that has become synonymous with the Mexican drug trade. Rising from poverty in the rugged mountains of Sinaloa to lead one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history, El Chapo amassed a fortune estimated at $2 billion in today's value. His story is one of ambition, brutality, and a near-mythical ability to outwit authorities. While his empire has crumbled, his legend as the most notorious drug lord of the 21st century endures. Born in 1957 in a small village in Sinaloa, Guzman grew up in abject poverty, the son of a cattle rancher. His early life was marked by hardship, and by his teens, he was already involved in the cultivation and smuggling of marijuana. But Guzman was no ordinary smuggler. He displayed a sharp business acumen and a ruthless streak that set him apart. He rose quickly through the ranks of the drug trade, and by the late 1980s, he had taken the reins of the Sinaloa cartel. Under El Chapo's leadership, the Sinaloa cartel became a drug trafficking juggernaut. His organization dominated the cocaine trade into the United States, supplying an estimated 25% of all illegal drugs entering the country. Guzman's genius lay in logistics. He pioneered the use of sophisticated underground tunnels, complete with ventilation systems and rail tracks, to smuggle drugs across the U.S.-Mexico border. His operations also utilized boats, planes, and even submarines, creating a global distribution network that rivaled the most efficient multinational corporations. El Chapo's business wasn't limited to cocaine. His cartel also trafficked marijuana, heroin, and methamphetamine, making billions while maintaining a stranglehold on the drug markets in North America and beyond. His empire stretched across continents, with operations in Europe, Asia, and South America, cementing his reputation as a kingpin of unparalleled reach. But Guzman's rise was fueled by more than just strategy. It was his sheer brutality that kept him on top. Known for his ruthless approach to eliminating rivals, El Chapo orchestrated countless murders, earning him a fearsome reputation. His violent tactics ensured loyalty within his organization and fear among his enemies. Despite his dominance, Guzman's career was punctuated by dramatic arrests and even more spectacular escapes. In 2001, he famously escaped from a high-security prison by hiding in a laundry cart. Years later, in 2015, he pulled off an even more daring escape through a mile-long tunnel dug directly into his prison cell. These escapes cemented his status as a near-mythical figure, a modern-day Houdini of the drug trade. Ultimately, Guzman's luck ran out. He was recaptured in 2016 and extradited to the United States, where he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Yet even behind bars, El Chapo's legacy remains. His story is a cautionary tale of ambition gone unchecked. A man who built an empire on the back of violence and addiction, and whose shadow still looms large over the drug trade. Number 8. Khun Sa, Myanmar. Earnings estimate, $2.5 billion. Khun Sa, the man who became synonymous with the Golden Triangle's heroin empire, was more than just a drug lord. He was a warlord, a self-styled king, and a master manipulator who turned Southeast Asia into the global epicenter of the heroin trade. With an estimated fortune of $2.5 billion in today's value, Khun Sa earned his moniker as the Opium King, controlling an empire that once supplied more than half of the world's heroin. Born in 1934 in the rugged Shan state of Burma, Khun Sa grew up in a region infamous for its poppy fields and lawlessness. His mixed Chinese and Shan heritage and the volatile political landscape of the time shaped his rise. By the age of 20, Khun Sa was already leading a militia, leveraging the chaos of post-colonial Burma to carve out his fiefdom in the untamed mountains of the Golden Triangle, where Burma, Thailand, and Laos converge. Khun Sa's brilliance lay in his ability to merge the worlds of war and commerce. He built a private army, initially aligning with the Burmese government, then with rebel groups, and ultimately forging his own path. He secured control over vast swathes of poppy fields, transforming raw opium into refined heroin in clandestine labs hidden deep in the jungle. His product was smuggled out through sophisticated networks that stretched across Asia, Europe, and the Americas, feeding the heroin epidemics of the 1970s and 1980s. But Khun Sa wasn't just a drug lord. He was a shrewd political operator. Styling himself as a freedom fighter for the Shan people, he cloaked his empire in the rhetoric of liberation. This dual identity earned him both loyalty from local communities and grudging tolerance from certain governments desperate to maintain stability in the region. Khun Sa's operations became so vast and efficient that he was virtually untouchable, even as the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration labeled him public enemy number one. At the height of his power, Khun Sa controlled a heroin pipeline that accounted for 60% of the world's supply. His influence was unmatched, with tens of thousands of soldiers under his command and a network of operatives spanning continents. He lived like royalty in a heavily fortified compound, surrounded by opulence and protected by a loyal army. Yet, Khun Sa's reign wasn't without its challenges. The Burmese government, under international pressure, launched military campaigns to dismantle his operations. By the mid-1990s, facing mounting threats and dwindling allies, Khun Sa struck a deal. In 1996, he surrendered to the Burmese government in exchange for immunity, retiring with his fortune intact. He spent his final years living comfortably in Yangon, a rare gangster who escaped retribution. Khun Sa's story is one of audacious ambition and unparalleled power. From the rugged hills of Shan State, he built an empire that reshaped the global drug trade, leaving behind a legacy as one of history's most enigmatic and influential crime lords. Number 7. Al Capone, USA. Earnings estimate, $3 billion. Al Capone, the name that epitomizes the roaring 20s and Prohibition-era America, remains one of the most infamous figures in the history of organized crime. At his peak, Capone's sprawling criminal empire generated an estimated $3 billion in today's value, built on illegal booze, gambling dens, and raw power. While his life of crime made him one of the most powerful men in America, it was the seemingly mundane crime of tax evasion that ultimately toppled the kingpin. Born in Brooklyn, New York in 1899 to Italian immigrant parents, Capone grew up in the tough streets of the city. Dropping out of school at 14, he turned to a life of petty crime and soon caught the attention of mob bosses who recognized his cunning and ruthlessness. By his early 20s, Capone had relocated to Chicago, where he quickly rose through the ranks of the criminal underworld under his mentor, Johnny Torrio. When Torrio retired after a near-fatal assassination attempt, Capone took control of the Chicago outfit, a sprawling network of illegal enterprises. The timing couldn't have been better. Prohibition had turned America into a thirsty nation, and Capone was ready to supply the booze. He controlled a vast network of speakeasies, breweries, and smuggling routes, importing liquor from Canada and distilling his own. His business acumen, combined with his capacity for violence, ensured his dominance over the city's underworld. But Capone's empire didn't stop at bootlegging. He ran gambling houses, controlled brothels, and even dabbled in political corruption, bribing officials and law enforcement to keep his operations running smoothly. At the height of his power, Capone was earning an estimated $100 million annually, a fortune that allowed him to live lavishly, wearing custom suits, driving luxury cars, and throwing extravagant parties. While Capone was often portrayed as a glamorous figure, his reign was marked by brutal violence. Rival gangs who dared to challenge him were met with deadly force, culminating in the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, where 7 members of a rival gang were gunned down in cold blood. Though Capone was never directly tied to the crime, it cemented his reputation as a ruthless overlord. Capone's downfall came not from bullets, but from bureaucracy. The U.S. government, unable to pin any of his violent crimes on him, turned to his finances. A young accountant working for the Treasury Department painstakingly pieced together evidence of tax evasion. In 1931, Capone was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. His time in Alcatraz, coupled with declining health due to syphilis, marked the end of his criminal career. Released in 1939, Capone retreated to his Florida mansion, living in relative obscurity until his death in 1947. Al Capone's legacy is a mix of myth and menace. He was a gangster who ruled an era, a man who embodied the excess and chaos of prohibition, and a cautionary tale of how even the most powerful criminals can be brought down by the smallest mistakes. Number 6. Griselda Blanco, Colombia. Earnings estimate, $3.5 billion. Griselda Blanco, known as the godmother of cocaine, was the undisputed queen of the Colombian cocaine trade during the 1970s and 1980s. Operating with terrifying efficiency and an iron grip, she built a $3.5 billion empire that spanned continents, leaving a trail of bloodshed and fear in her wake. Her legacy is one of ruthless ambition, innovation in smuggling, and unmatched control over the cocaine market, making her one of the most powerful and feared women in the history of organized crime. Born in 1943 in Cartagena, Colombia, Blanco's early life was marked by hardship. Raised in the slums of Medellin, she quickly adapted to the violent streets of her neighborhood. By her teenage years, Blanco had already embraced a life of crime, involved in petty thefts and street hustles. But her vision was much grander than small-time criminality. She set her sights on the booming cocaine trade, an emerging industry that would soon make her one of the wealthiest and most notorious criminals in history. In the 1970s, Blanco moved to the United States and made Miami her base of operations, taking advantage of the city's proximity to Colombia to establish smuggling routes. She masterminded the operation of shipping vast quantities of cocaine from Colombia to the U.S., using innovative methods such as hiding the drugs inside condoms, clothing, and even the bodies of animals. Blanco's cartel was responsible for flooding the streets of Miami with cocaine, and soon, the entire U.S. East Coast was under her control. Blanco's ruthless methods ensured that her empire was built on fear and power. She was notorious for her violent temper and her willingness to eliminate anyone who posed a threat, be it rivals, law enforcement, or even members of her own cartel. She was rumored to have ordered the deaths of hundreds, including associates who failed her, and was linked to multiple assassinations during the bloody years of Miami's cocaine wars. Blanco's empire was not just about drugs. It was a kingdom of terror. In her prime, Blanco was making millions of dollars a month. She ran her business like a corporation, with a tight network of loyal subordinates handling everything from distribution to money laundering. The infamous cocaine cowboys who worked for her were ruthless enforcers who carried out her commands without question. Blanco's influence stretched far beyond the streets, with ties to politicians, law enforcement, and even the Colombian cartels, ensuring that her operation remained untouchable for years. However, Blanco's reign didn't last forever. In the early 1980s, law enforcement began to close in on her empire. She was arrested in 1985 for drug trafficking, and after spending several years in prison, Blanco was released in 2004 and deported to Colombia. She spent her final years in relative obscurity until her death in 2012. Griselda Blanco's story is a stark reminder of how power, wealth, and violence can intertwine to create an empire built on fear and greed. The godmother of cocaine may have fallen, but her legacy as one of the most influential and dangerous figures in the history of organized crime remains unchallenged. Number 5. Adnan Khashoggi, Saudi Arabia. Earnings estimate, $4 billion. Adnan Khashoggi was a man of extraordinary wealth, intrigue, and ambition. A Saudi Arabian arms dealer and businessman whose empire spanned the globe. Khashoggi became one of the wealthiest men in the world during the 1970s and 1980s. With an estimated fortune of $4 billion in today's value, he was as notorious for his lavish lifestyle and deep connections to the world's elite as he was for his involvement in arms deals, financial fraud, and smuggling operations that reached the highest echelons of international power. Born in 1935 in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, Khashoggi came from a wealthy family with ties to the royal family. His uncle, the Saudi defense minister, was a key figure in the kingdom's military apparatus, which would later prove to be invaluable in Khashoggi's rise to prominence. With a keen business mind and an appetite for opulence, Khashoggi quickly made a name for himself in the international arms trade during the Cold War era. His ability to broker massive arms deals with various governments, including the US, Iran, and several African and Middle Eastern nations, made him a powerful and enigmatic figure in the world of high-stakes international business. At his peak, Khashoggi's wealth was legendary. He was a regular in the world's most exclusive circles, from lavish parties on yachts to the glitz of Hollywood. His personal fortune funded a lifestyle of unimaginable luxury, private jets, palatial homes, and priceless art collections. He was known to spend millions on a single occasion, buying extravagant gifts for friends and allies or throwing lavish parties that seemed to know no limits. Yet beneath this display of excess, Khashoggi's business dealings were shadowed by darker associations. Khashoggi's rise to wealth was fueled in part by his dealings in arms and international smuggling. But it wasn't just the legal contracts that built his fortune. Allegations of corruption, financial fraud, and under-the-table dealings were persistent throughout his career. He was deeply connected to the political elite, having brokered arms sales to various countries during times of conflict, including the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s, where he allegedly played a role in the covert arms trade between the US and Iran. These deals were conducted through a complex web of intermediaries, shell companies, and secretive operations that helped Khashoggi avoid scrutiny, at least for a time. Khashoggi's entanglement in financial fraud became more evident as his businesses began to unravel in the late 1980s. His investments, particularly in high-profile ventures like his lavish yacht and real estate properties, ultimately led to his downfall. When his wealth started to dwindle due to failed ventures and the collapse of key deals, Khashoggi found himself embroiled in a series of legal battles. In the end, he was forced to declare bankruptcy, but not before having left a legacy marked by both opulence and scandal. Despite the controversies surrounding him, Khashoggi's ties to powerful figures, politicians, royalty, and military leaders allowed him to maintain a degree of influence even as his wealth faded. He remained a shadowy figure in international affairs until his death in 2017. Adnan Khashoggi's life story is a fascinating mix of ambition, excess, and secrecy, and he remains one of the most intriguing and complex figures in the history of global crime and business. Number 4. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Mexico. Earnings estimate: $4.5 billion. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, known as the Lord of the Skies, is remembered as one of the most ingenious and fearsome drug lords to ever rise from Mexico's underworld. Leading the infamous Juarez cartel, Carrillo Fuentes amassed a fortune of $4.5 billion in today's value, making him a titan of the drug trade. His reign was marked by innovation, ruthless ambition, and a legacy of terror that changed the landscape of the global narcotics industry forever. Born in 1956 in Sinaloa, Mexico, Carrillo Fuentes was introduced to the world of drug trafficking at a young age through his family connections. By the 1980s, he had quickly risen within the ranks of the Juarez cartel, a powerful drug syndicate based in Ciudad Juarez, one of Mexico's most dangerous border cities. However, it was his strategic vision and relentless drive that propelled him to the top. Carrillo Fuentes wasn't just another cartel boss. He was a mastermind who revolutionized the way drugs were trafficked across international borders. One of Carrillo Fuentes' most remarkable achievements was his use of airplanes to transport massive quantities of cocaine and other drugs from South America into the United States. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, when the smuggling routes through the borderlands were becoming increasingly dangerous, Carrillo Fuentes turned to aircraft, earning him the nickname the Lord of the Skies. He orchestrated one of the most sophisticated air fleets in the world, with a network of planes capable of flying under the radar to deliver tons of drugs into the U.S. without detection. His fleet was so vast and efficient that he became the primary supplier of cocaine to the U.S., making him the king of $1 billion trade. Carrillo Fuentes' success was not merely based on his aerial operations, but also on his ability to maintain control over his territory through fear and political influence. He was a master at weaving complex networks of corrupt politicians, law enforcement officers, and businessmen to keep his operations safe from the authorities. The Juarez cartel under his leadership expanded its reach beyond just drugs, operating in money laundering, extortion, and even arms trafficking. His cartel dominated the streets of Mexico, and his violent reputation ensured that rivals knew not to cross him. Carrillo Fuentes was known to execute anyone who betrayed him, using brutal force to maintain order. However, it was not just his capacity for violence that made him formidable, it was his cunning business sense and strategic thinking. While many of his rivals relied on brute force, Carrillo Fuentes built an empire that was more like a well-oiled corporate machine. Sadly, Amado Carrillo Fuentes' reign was short-lived. In 1997, during an attempt to undergo plastic surgery to alter his appearance and avoid capture, he died unexpectedly from complications. His death shocked the world and left a power vacuum that led to fierce battles among rival cartels for control of his empire. Yet, even in death, Carrillo Fuentes' influence on the drug trade and his status as a legend in the world of organized crime endures. His pioneering use of airplanes for smuggling changed the game, and his legacy as one of Mexico's most powerful and elusive drug lords remains firmly etched in the annals of criminal history. Number 3. Vyacheslav Ivankov. Russia. Earnings estimate: $5 billion. Vyacheslav Ivankov, better known as Yapenchik, was a man who rose from the murky streets of Moscow to become one of the most feared and powerful figures in the global criminal underworld. A towering figure within the Russian Mafia, Ivankov's empire spanned continents and industries. With an estimated fortune of $5 billion in today's value, Ivankov's name became synonymous with extortion, arms trafficking, and racketeering. His ruthless tactics and cold, calculating mind earned him a seat among the most infamous crime bosses of the 20th century. Born in 1940 in the Soviet Union, Ivankov's path into organized crime was almost inevitable. Raised in a time when the Soviet Union was a breeding ground for corruption and clandestine dealings, Ivankov quickly learned the ins and outs of the criminal world. By his early adulthood, he was entrenched in the Soviet underworld, climbing the ranks of the criminal syndicates that operated in the shadows of Russian society. He was known for his intelligence, sharp negotiating skills, and willingness to use brutal force to eliminate enemies or those who crossed him. Ivankov's true rise to prominence came after he moved to the United States in the 1980s. The collapse of the Soviet Union created an opening for the Russian Mafia to expand globally, and Ivankov was one of its most successful emissaries. Operating primarily out of New York, Ivankov became a key player in the Russian criminal operations in the U.S. His connections with Russian oligarchs, corrupt politicians, and law enforcement officials allowed him to build an empire based on racketeering, money laundering, and extortion. Ivankov's control over Russian immigrants in the U.S. allowed him to expand his reach, demanding protection money from local businesses and running lucrative scams with international ties. Not only was Ivankov involved in racketeering, but his empire also extended to arms trafficking and smuggling operations. He used his network to move illegal weapons, drugs, and other contraband across borders, enriching himself and his allies. His influence extended beyond the U.S. to other parts of the world, where he formed partnerships with various criminal syndicates and earned his reputation as a key architect of the global underworld. Despite his success, Ivankov's life was not without obstacles. In 1995, he was arrested by the FBI in New York on charges of extortion, but his criminal empire remained intact even while he served time in prison. His ability to operate both in the U.S. and Russia, bridging the gap between two vastly different criminal landscapes, cemented his status as a true criminal mastermind. When Ivankov was released in 2004, he returned to Russia, where he continued to exert his influence in the criminal world. Ivankov's reign came to an end in 2009 when he was assassinated in Moscow. But his death did little to erase his legacy. His fortune, amassed through decades of crime, and his formidable network continue to haunt the corridors of power in the criminal world. Vyacheslav Ivankov's life is a testament to the ruthless ambition, cunning, and power that can be wielded by those who live outside the law. He remains a legend in the annals of organized crime, a figure who transcended borders, left a bloody trail, and forever altered the dynamics of global criminal syndicates. Number 2. Dawood Ibrahim, India Middle East. Earnings estimate, $5 billion. Dawood Ibrahim, the notorious kingpin of the D Company, is one of the most elusive and dangerous figures in the world of organized crime. With an estimated fortune of $5 billion, Ibrahim's empire has stretched from the chaotic streets of Mumbai to the underworld of the Middle East, making him an international criminal force to be reckoned with. His influence is so vast that his name evokes fear across multiple continents, and his operations have left an indelible mark on global crime, with tentacles in the drug trade, smuggling, arms trafficking, and financial fraud. Born in 1955 in Mumbai, India, Ibrahim grew up in the impoverished neighborhoods where the lure of crime was ever present. From a young age, he exhibited a sharp mind for criminal enterprises. By the 1980s, he had risen within the ranks of Mumbai's underworld, quickly building a reputation as a ruthless and clever operator. What set Ibrahim apart from other gangsters was his ability to not just control the street-level rackets, but to expand his influence into global operations. Ibrahim's rise to prominence began with his leadership of the D Company, a criminal syndicate that would become one of the most powerful and feared groups in the world. Under his leadership, the D Company became a sprawling criminal empire involved in a wide range of illicit activities. Its operations ranged from drug trafficking, money laundering, and extortion to counterfeiting and arms smuggling. Ibrahim's network stretched from Asia to the Middle East, Africa, and even into Europe, making him a key player in the global crime trade. His major profits came from the international drug trade, particularly heroin, which he smuggled into markets across the world. He established strategic alliances with various other criminal syndicates and cartels, including those in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Golden Triangle, securing the flow of drugs into Europe and North America. In addition to his control over narcotics, Ibrahim's D Company played a key role in arms trafficking, providing weapons to various groups involved in conflicts across the Middle East and South Asia. What made Ibrahim particularly dangerous was his ability to operate with a high level of sophistication. He was not just a common gangster. He was a master strategist who could evade capture for years, even as global law enforcement agencies closed in on him. His ties to terrorist organizations, such as his alleged involvement in the 1993 Mumbai bombings, further cemented his status as one of the world's most wanted men. Despite his brutal methods, Ibrahim also showed an uncanny knack for financial fraud. He was involved in high-level money laundering, using a vast network of shell companies, banks, and corrupt officials to clean the proceeds from his criminal enterprises. His connections to politicians and businessmen across the globe allowed him to operate with near impunity for decades, while his criminal wealth grew exponentially. Dawood Ibrahim's life is a testament to the ruthlessness, cunning, and global reach of organized crime. Even today, he remains a ghost in the shadows, constantly pursued by law enforcement but never captured. His fortune, built on blood and treachery, is a chilling reminder of the dark power that criminal masterminds can wield. Ibrahim's legacy as the leader of the D Company continues to influence the world of organized crime, and his name is etched in infamy as one of the most feared and elusive criminals in history. Number 1. Pablo Escobar, Colombia. Earnings estimate, $30 billion. Pablo Escobar, the name synonymous with wealth, violence, and the dark underbelly of international drug trade, was a man whose influence stretched across continents, changing the course of history with every dollar he made. With an estimated fortune of $30 billion, Escobar remains the undisputed king of the cocaine trade. At his peak, he controlled a staggering 80% of the global cocaine market, making him one of the richest and most dangerous criminals in history. Born in 1949 in the small town of Rio Negro, Colombia, Escobar's rise from humble beginnings to becoming one of the world's most infamous drug lords was fueled by his unparalleled ambition and ruthlessness. By the 1970s, he had already started building his criminal empire, leveraging the booming cocaine trade in South America. It was in the heart of Colombia, through the Medellin cartel, that Escobar truly revolutionized the drug trade, creating an operation that would dominate the world for nearly 2 decades. Escobar's Medellin cartel was not just a drug trafficking operation. It was a well-oiled global empire, with networks spanning across the Americas, Europe, and beyond. The cartel's operations were vast and sophisticated, from manufacturing massive quantities of cocaine in Colombia to smuggling it into the United States, the world's largest consumer of the drug. He used a combination of bribes, terror, and political influence to carve a path through the Colombian government and law enforcement, ensuring his empire ran smoothly and without interruption. What made Escobar a unique and terrifying figure was his ability to seamlessly blend business with brutality. His business acumen was sharp. He was a master of logistics, marketing, and strategic partnerships. But he wasn't afraid to use violence to eliminate anyone who threatened his empire. Escobar's motto was simple: plata o plomo, offering his rivals and government officials a choice between taking a bribe or facing violent death. Escobar's reign of terror brought unimaginable wealth, but it also left a trail of destruction. He amassed fortunes so vast that he became known for his lavish lifestyle. He built massive estates, including his infamous Hacienda Napoles, a sprawling property complete with a zoo and private airstrip. Escobar, at one point, was one of the richest men in the world, his wealth surpassing that of most countries. However, his reign was also marked by bloodshed. His cartel was responsible for countless deaths, from rival drug lords to innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of his war against the state. Despite his violent methods, Escobar was also known for his philanthropy. He built schools, soccer fields, and even housing for the poor in Medellin, gaining the loyalty of the local population, who saw him as a Robin Hood-like figure. This combination of generosity and terror earned him a cult-like following in some circles, even as he evaded capture for years. But in the end, no empire lasts forever. As the U.S. and Colombian governments united in their pursuit of Escobar, his empire crumbled. In 1993, after a dramatic escape from a self-designed luxury prison, Escobar was finally cornered and killed in a rooftop shootout in Medellin. Pablo Escobar's story is one of unthinkable wealth, unimaginable power, and tragic violence. His legacy continues to cast a long shadow over the world of organized crime. and his name, synonymous with cocaine and corruption, remains a chilling reminder of the price of absolute power.